But I also used to do like a web series that was making fun of video blogs. It was just me with a camcorder messing about. It was silly. But I tricked someone who ran an anime convention into thinking it was popular by getting all of my friends to tell them that it was. And they let me do a panel and ran a special episode, and we had this whole bit where we pretended that we were getting, like, taken off stage and being forced to leave and resisting, but no one had told the security guys that it was a bit, and they came up to actually wrestle us off the stage, and it was probably the most terrifying moment of my life, was a very large man who did not know what was going on, deciding that he needed to intervene with his body. Transformers in particular was really cool. There's robots, and they can turn into other stuff, like cars and planes, and there's good guy robots and bad guy robots, and they fight, and usually the good guys win. And also, the good guy's leader had the coolest name ever. Optimus Prime. The most best. And the leader of the Decepticons was called Megatron. Mega meaning really big, and Tron, which as a child I obviously knew was Greek for the word instrument. Big instrument. Is there a joke in there for like what that could be referring to? I'm not sure. I'll workshop it. But basically, Hasbro had chosen all the best possible names for my enjoyment. Well, the enjoyment of 80s kids, which I was then stealing from the future. Like some kind of time thief. Speaking of thieving time from you, I leave now as the opportunity to pause and go and do a different thing. And I can see the engagement metrics, so I can tell how many of you took that opportunity. I was wondering how the show managed to get away with this, so I asked my father, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, how it came to be, and he told me it was all because of that pig dog capitalist Batman. Why did I say Batman? Starscream's deal is he wants to be in charge of the Decepticons, and he makes this, like, really obvious. Like, it's literally the first thing he says, and he spends most of the show trying to usurp Megatron in various ways that are obvious and don't work, and it's really silly, and it's probably the best part of the show. Like, he just tells Megatron to his face, oh, it'd be better if I was in charge. You can't do that. You can't just walk up to a space dictator and say, you know, I think I could do it better. Don't do it. And for reasons which you're not really supposed to think about, but I will, Megatron just kind of lets him live repeatedly after numerous attempted backstabbings and just general lip. I guess they don't really have lips. I'm not really sure why he keeps Starscream around, and I think it's partially because he knows Starscream is probably, like, pretty clever. I mean, he's his second in command, and he secretly, more than anything, wants his respect. A bit like how, like, Batman doesn't kill the Joker because he secretly wants to rehabilitate the Joker, because doing that against his greatest enemy would be, like, the ultimate victory. Like, that's how you win against the Joker. You actually change him into, like, a normal member of society. It's like that, but with evil. Where I think what Megatron wants most in the world, not just the subjugation of the other robots, is I think what Megatron wants in the whole world, not just the utter subjugation of Cybertron and all of the Transformers, is for Starscream to like him and work for him on purpose because he wants to. I think that's his ultimate goal. Maybe Megatron just wants Starscream to love him back, and this prevents him from doing the tactical thing and stabbing him when he's robo-sleeping with a cyber mace. Megatron has a cyber mace, and sometimes he decides he would like to use it instead of his gun. And I respect that and all of his other decisions. Maybe he just wants Starscream to hold him. I mean, like, because Megatron turns into a gun, so someone has to hold it to shoot them with it. If I was some kind of hack, I would film a cutaway here where I turn into a gun and the gun falls down because no one's holding it. So if there's one thing about the show that I really do like and still holds up, it's this relationship between a bad guy and his even more ineffective bad second in command who wants to take his place, and just the bizarre status quo they're in of betrayal and forgiveness, but also very mad at the betrayal. And this, it's interesting. It's very, like, there's a lot of slash fiction. There's a lot of slash fiction about these characters, and it's because That's the only way to really resolve the deadlock of how these characters interact with each other. Why else would this be happening if they didn't secretly want a little bit more than they were getting, you know? It's the only way to resolve the deadlock. Also, people are horny for robots. It happens. I've never met someone who could turn into a car. But if they could... But then they get rebuilt, they get put back together, and they're totally fine, except one of them is missing their personality component. So the Transformers have a separate part that's their personality, but it's a separate part of the rest of their being, so they can be alive without it, they'll just be like zombies. So is the personality component the Transformers' soul? That's not true, the Transformers do have souls, they're called sparks, and it is distinguishable from the personality component. So the part of you that's you, like all of your personhood, is actually a distinct physical thing from the part of you that is a soul, which the robots have. So I should have taken my own advice and not thought about it as much, because now I am confused and upset. There's an extensive wiki about Transformers. Now, I've in the past made fun of fan wikis of games and shows. You know, I have a couple of minor criticisms. For example, I think that they are evil, destroy all art and meaning, and replace it with lore. But I will make an exception specifically for the Transformers wiki, because as a long-running media property with many incarnations, it actually does get kind of confusing. It's good to have this stuff to look up. It's really well written, and there's a lot of really funny captions on it, which is pretty awesome. The only other fan wiki I probably wouldn't delete is the Warrior Cats one, because even the creators of the books need it to keep track of the names and appearances of all of the characters. It's an important resource even for the authors, because what happens if you forget what colour Bramble Spam's pelt was? And what happens when he rises through the ranks and becomes Bramble Star? I've never read a Warrior Cats book, but I've read a lot of that wiki, and hoo boy, it's bad, but it's a necessary evil for the books to continue. We're getting pretty off track, and I need a wee. The episodes exist to showcase the various products and the things that they can turn into, and the plot facilitates this as straightforwardly as possible. The good and bad guy robots travel to Earth to gather energy, that's energon, as they call it, to continue fighting their war because they've completely destroyed their planet, and they crash land because there's a meteor shower or something. And this, like, kills them all, or puts them in a coma, or flips their off switch. It does something, but basically they're gone. And then 4 million years later, there's a volcanic eruption, and that accidentally wakes up something in the ship, and it starts to revive the robots. I wasn't sure how much time actually passed between them crashing and getting revived. And I was really, really shocked to discover that a title card comes up saying 4 million years later. I'd forgotten about that. And, like, all the characters collectively agree to assume or pretend that Cybertron's probably fine after 4 million years, so they should just continue the mission as if that part didn't happen. Like, this horrible, or potentially interesting from a sci-fi perspective thing happens, and they're just like, well, let's just not worry about it. And that's really one of the main themes of the show. It's don't worry about it. This outlook is best epitomized in the second episode, when a kid asks an Autobot how they transform. And he says, well, like this. And then he transforms. Like, that's... First of all, it's pretty funny. And this kind of epitomizes the show's attitude to many of the elements of its own story. And it's... Just don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. And this isn't like a criticism of the show. I'm not doing a CinemaSins thing where I'm going to be like, oh, some of the Decepticons turn into flying vehicles so they can fly, but sometimes Megatron just is flying because he feels like it. Ding. I'm not doing that. It's fine. He can fly if he wants to. To be honest, I think this is one of the reasons why the show does kind of work for kids. You don't have to worry too much about all the stuff you might have missed. And this stuff figures in the story's villains as well. Like, Megatron's a bad guy, but he's not, like, super evil. He's just a bit mean. and he doesn't win often enough to actually be dangerous, so it's fine. He spends most of his time arguing with his second-in-command, Starscream. Anyway, Starscream and Megatron and the Decepticons' evil foolishness is contrasted with best, most specialist man, who retains this comfortable fun by having this very positive and almost fatherly voice. He's voiced by Peter Cullen, who has voiced the character for many years now. He even voiced Optimus Prime in the Michael Bay movies. I think he came back because he wanted, he likes entertaining children. It's fun. And also adult children. Where Transformers is basically a show where your cool dad gets in fights with these two fun guys who love each other but also hate each other. And at the end, they all go home. And it's fine. Sometimes looking back actually makes looking forwards fun as well, because you can see just how much film criticism in video form online has changed in the last 10 years. Like, it's developed so much in so many interesting and cool directions. Like, I'm really loving what a lot of modern film critic people are doing, like folding ideas. Modern Lindsay Ellis is, like, absolutely amazing. I love stuff that Jenny Nicholson's doing. I mean, I'm ripping off her videos right now. Nick Spheres is doing some absolutely incredible stuff. Like, she's just dropping a Hegel reference just suddenly and moving on. YouTube film criticism is reaching its apex. We're actually about to reach maximum Slavoj. You're probably thinking, why did he bring up his videos at the beginning? His old videos that he doesn't even have on his channel anymore. What's the point of that? That's a silly reference. And the reason why is, I guess, because in my own small way, making this video is part of the process of me thinking about who I am now and who I've become and who I used to be. Like, Transformers is forever going to be a part of me. It's inescapable. And every now and then I return to it with the knowledge I've gained as an adult and think about the whole thing in a new and different and hopefully clearer way. God, those videos. I used to have hair and happiness in my eyes and a future. It's funny because maybe about 10, 12 years ago, I was into the nostalgia critic. Like, I lived in the woods. I didn't interact that much with media. I really quite liked watching someone really digestibly talk about a movie for 20 minutes, because I couldn't watch the movie, I didn't have easy access to that, but I could watch a guy mention the movie and summarize it, and it was like a fun Wikipedia, like an easily digestible Wikipedia. It wasn't very funny, but it's not what it's for. It just means you get to watch a movie and get told an opinion on it, like, within 10 to 20 minutes, and that's nice, that's very comfy. But there it is again, nostalgia critic. It's funny because that's become an increasingly, like, less important part of the character. Like, no one's nostalgic for Justice League, bro. Not even me, and I'm a fan of most of Zack Snyder's other movies. I'm sure someone's already made the joke that they're nostalgic for the time before they'd seen the film, but pretend I came up with it and said it first here, please. But as an adult, looking back, a lot of the stuff that I didn't really notice as a kid is now really important and interesting to me, and I don't think there'll ever quite be a film that fills this specific space. Like, movies don't kill important characters anymore. Like, Optimus Prime came back in all the reboots of the show, and he does come back later on in the show after this movie. They kind of wussed out on the really interesting thing of having the father figure be just dead forever. But nowadays in movies, really popular and iconic characters rarely are allowed to just stay dead. Like, in a comic continuity now, when a character dies, they'll be back, there'll be a reboot, there'll be more of him, someone else will take his place in everything but the name of that one character. There'll be another Thor, there'll be another Iron Man, and the original one will come back anyway. It doesn't really matter. Like, maybe they'll kill off characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe purely because the actors do eventually die because they have to be human. But effectively, no one can really die in the ideological universe of these stories anymore because they are the appeal. And the Transformers movie is from an era where you really could kill the principal character at the beginning and and do a story about dealing with that. I think the closest a movie has come to the Transformers movie maybe ever is like Logan, maybe. I really liked that movie. I tend to be really not into superhero stuff anymore. Like, they can't really do any meaningful stuff because a lot of these characters have to be around for like this big franchise. And even when someone does get killed off, they usually come back. So I'm just not that invested in the story. So actually having a story where you watch these characters that you have known for a while die, and you know it probably is forever, actually is super meaningful. Like, Logan impacted me in a way I didn't expect, and I think in a way that is true of Transformers, but only really with the benefit of hindsight. Everyone who was a kid when the old X-Men movies were coming out has had time to mature and grow into an adult, and now with Logan go, oh, I understand the mature side of this story. Whereas you can only really appreciate the interesting things about Transformers, the movie, now, decades later, because it happened when everyone was a kid and really not prepared. But at the same time, that makes it more interesting. Again, I have to assert that in any kind of critical analysis, the movie is bad.